Kinlaur had been imprisoned in the Imperial City for months, or maybe it was a year. He hadn't dared keep track of the time passing. He figured doing so would drive him terribly insane, or even worse, have him fall victim to his own despair. Kinlaur wasn't entirely innocent, but he also, arguably, wasn't entirely guilty. What landed him here was a job. One that he was assured was entirely legal and on the books, but now, despite those assurances, he and his fellow soldiers of fortune rotted in prison, save their damned leader, a smooth-talking bastard named Benoit Avray. Mischievous but likable Breton spellsword who persuaded Kinlaur to join his company many years ago, and Kinlaur idolized him for it. Kinlaur was a Dunmer orphan, raised in Cheydinhal. His young life was mostly unremarkable. He had a few moments that were exciting, at least to the mediocre life of a poor young boy, but ultimately nothing worth recalling. When he reached an old enough age to know his numbers, letters, and stand taller than other children, he was told what many in the orphanage were: to get a job. He was given a bedroll, a change of clothes, a handful of coins, and, well, that was it. He did what work he could, working in the stables, delivering goods, cleaning, but he was never able to get a permanent position or an apprenticeship. The Imperials didn't trust the Dunmer, except for the cheapest labor, and the rich Dunmer didn't want the poor ones dragging them down. Besides, Kinlaur filled no particular niche. In Cheydinhal, despite the large Dunmer population, he grew up mostly with the stories of Nibene, which were almost always tinged with Imperial patriotism and scholarly piety. Rarely, if ever, was Kinlaur allowed to hear of his own people, and when he did, they were insulting words about figures like Baron Zaya and her amorous affairs. He had grown to hate the idea of Morrowind. He felt abandoned by his own people, and even worse, by his own parents. If Morrowind was so bad that they dared to come here where they were practically spat on, then what was wretched Morrowind like? The Morrowind immigrants he had spoken to claimed that Morrowind was just as bad as Nibene in its piety, but just swap the zealotry of the Divines for the Tribunal, the living gods of Morrowind. False gods, the immigrants claimed, even if they appeared immortal. Instead of sharing tales of Morrowind's and Cyrodiil's histories and heroes, he and his fellow Dunmer idolized the adventurer, the mercenary. They eagerly swapped stories of fellow Dark Elves who managed to escape the lower class once they committed to a monster hunt or raided an alien ruin. To Kinlaur, it seemed like the only achievable route to escape his station in life, as honest work seemed to get him nowhere. It was as if the Imperials wanted to keep him down. And indeed, they most likely did. He wanted to leave, he needed to leave, but to do that he would need coin and equipment. So Kinlaur bided his time, and waited for an opportunity. He continued dreaming, his dreams of escape. One summer, during one of Kinlaur's better seasonal jobs working at an inn, is when he met Benoit. The nobles of Cyrodiil often fought amongst themselves for the rights of land and trade, which kept mercenaries in constant employ. And even when peace was forced by the Emperor, or a stalemate was called, the countryside was filled to the brim with monsters and bandits, much to a mercenary's delight. Benoit and his men had just turned in a contract to the Lord of Cheydinhal. They had hunted down some members of a prominent Dunmer gang, just outside the city. Usually, the bigger gangs got away with their crimes, peddling skooma and demanding protection money, but this time they made a mistake. They had killed an Imperial nobleman in a deal gone wrong. You see, Dunmer killing Dunmer was nothing out of the ordinary in the slums of Cheydinhal. It barely got a guard's report written for it. But Imperials being killed by Dunmer, now that was something the Lord of Cheydinhal, who himself was a Dark Elf, could not ignore. After a job well done, Benoit and his men gallivanted around the city, and spent their new wealth, finally taking rest at an inn. And there someone caught the eye of Benoit, Kinlaur. A teenaged Kinlaur had obviously been tailing the men. He tried to be inconspicuous, but it was hard not to notice his awkwardly tall and lanky body, as well as his glare. And though he looked skinny, he also clearly knew how to defend himself, or at least, how to survive. That is, if the scars across his arms and face said anything. These rowdiers interested Kinlaur. They held people from every race. A Bosmer beside 2 orcs, various Bretons, Nords, a Khajiit, and even an overly snooty Altmer sorcerer. And more interesting still, they each wore shining armor and weapons, as well as heaps of jewelry. One, a big Nord, even had what Kinlaur thought was an enchanted Mithril hauberk. In some ways he hated them, but in many more ways he wished to be like them. They had the imagined life that he wanted, the freedom to leave and go anywhere, the ability to make coin overnight and spend it, not the worry of eating tomorrow. Regardless of if they were respected or not, they held clear strength that made people stand clear. He would have asked to join them, but he knew these armored and talented mercenaries would never take him along. But he could take some of their riches from them. That would have to be his chance. It was doable, especially with how drunk they were getting. And as a test, while serving drinks, he was even able to pocket some extra coins from the High Elf, but that wasn't enough. The night came to a close, and the richer members of the company went to their personal rooms. Kinlaur too had finished his shift, but rather than sleeping, he snuck upstairs to the room of the Nord. He used the inn's spare key and slipped the chainmail off of the snoozing drunk man, and for good measure took his fine pants too. He went downstairs with his bounty, fancifully smiling, imagining visions of the equipment that he could buy when he sold it. When he finished his descent, he found Benoit casually waiting for him past the bottom step. Although Benoit had been drinking all night, both at the inn and at a Dunmer corner club or two, he appeared almost completely sober. He casually held out a hand, stopping Kinlaur, and told him, with his highbrow Breton voice, "You really shouldn't have done that, my lad. Up in taking Kvenf's things. A few coins from Elantra I could accept, and she quite honestly needs to guard her coin purse better. That chainmail isn't going to be leaving with you. Nor his pants, for that matter. We'll be taking them back now. We'll beat you a little, but you'll live. I assure you. Lessons learned without pain are ones rarely remembered." At that point, two of the other members of the company began descending the stairs behind Kinlaur. He panicked, and a quick movement went to hit Benoit with a loose mithril mail in his right hand. Benoit effortlessly blocked the shot with his forearm, the mithril rings only barely stinging as they feebly wrapped around his arm. But what he didn't expect was that this was a feint, and Kinlaur was able to strike Benoit square in the lip with his left fist. Kinlaur expected Benoit to fall, or at least stumble, so he could make his escape. But Benoit simply smiled, moved his body quickly into Kinlaur's, grabbed his shoulders, and threw him to the ground. The other two mercenaries were on him immediately. Kinlaur was beaten by the mercenaries for what felt like ages. Benoit slowly, meticulously returned the mithril shirt and pants to Kvenf, putting them back on his body while he slept. Minutes later, Benoit meandered back to Kinlaur and bent over. Bringing his face close, he simply asked, "Do you want a job, my lad?" The next morning, Kinlaur left for the company, wearing a new chainmail shirt. Though this one was simply made of iron rings, Benoit promised him he'd get mithril eventually, if he stuck with them. He had failed to tell Kinlaur that the chainmail, and the sword as well as the cheap healing potion to ease his bruises, wasn't a gift. It would come out of his first paycheck. But for the moment, despite being sore, Kinlaur was surprisingly happy, as he left Cheydinhal's borders for the first time. For nigh on a decade, Kinlaur fought in Benoit's company. Kinlaur had achieved what he wished for as a kid. He had escaped poverty to live the life of an adventurer. He no longer had to step aside for noble imperials for fear of being lashed, nor did he ever have to worry about eating nor money. He spent his coin frivolously on food and trinkets. Training under Benoit, Kinlaur's lanky body filled out, and he learned to be quite handy with a blade, as well as able to cast a handful of spells. Over time he learned he favored medium armor, so he never got that mithril shirt, but he got riches all the same. The company raided ruins and burned monsters' dens. They even fought as auxiliary in a few pitched battles between the border lords of Cyrodiil. He had made many friends, lost them, and gained more yet again. Benoit had given him the life he wanted. During the winter, the company set up in the Imperial City. The capital of the Empire was so large a mercenary could make his entire life's work within its walls. From finding jobs clearing bandits and monsters from the labyrinthine sewers, to tracking down serial killers and thieves through the winding streets, to aiding the mages of the Arcane University in their mystical work. The last winter the company spent together, Benoit had found a way to get the entire company hired to protect a single man and his assets for a mountain of pay. The man to be protected was an Imperial named Opius, a businessman who stood at the head of an important trading guild. Due to this station, Opius was given threats constantly. The men took alternating days, protecting both Opius and his properties in shifts. Kinlaur loved this arrangement, since it allowed him to explore the Endless City. The Imperial City has many names, but one it is often called is the City of 1,000 Cults. This nickname is due to just how many temples and religions are found within its walls. And before Kinlaur's imprisonment, he had found faith for the first time in his life, through a chance encounter. While walking the streets, admiring the many grand buildings of the Temple District, a Dunmer, androgynous beneath their traditional robe, approached Kinlaur with a smile, and invited him to walk with them. To Kinlaur's surprise, he took them up on this. For what reason, he wasn't entirely sure. Kinlaur rarely allowed himself to be led by others in the Imperial City, unless he thought it would lead to a job or some fun. But this dark elf didn't appear like they were going to offer him either, but regardless, Kinlaur joined them. They walked together and looked at the structures of the city, and naturally talked about everything. The city, the temples, Cyrodiil, the Empire, work, hobbies, and lastly, the conversation seemed to naturally segue into religion. And somehow, Kinlaur was the one to bring it up. Religion was a topic Kinlaur usually avoided, since he held no god within his thoughts. During the conversation, Kinlaur admitted his lack of faith, and the person began quoting excerpts from various books, one named Exodus from Somerset, the story of St. Veloth's settling of Morrowind. As this priest spoke, it was as if Veloth spoke through them. Kinlaur was told the story of the Chimer's predestination to Morrowind, and it enraptured him. The priest, though kind, was still unknown to Kinlaur. When he asked their name, they shook their head, and proclaimed they had cast aside such wrappings. A name, a gender, an identity. They said simply to call them the Diviner, their temple rank, and so Kinlaur did. The Diviner led Kinlaur to a grand temple, and he felt something he never had before. He felt a chill down his spine looking at the 3 statues of the Almsevii towering over him. Over the course of many visits throughout the winter days, he learned more of the Dunmer's ancestor worship, as well as their reverence for the Tribunal, and the many stories of these figures. The esoteric 36 lessons of Vivec, the thrilling tale of Nerevar's battle against the Dwemer, and how the Chimer became the Dunmer, and even the humbleness of Saint Terilms the Barefooted, who abandoned a life of riches to help the poor. Hearing these proud tales of his ancestors and their living gods, he grew a fire within him, one that he had been lacking his entire life. He told the Diviner that he had dismissed the Tribunal, just as the other Dunmer of Cheydinhal had. The Cheydinhal Dunmer claimed that the Tribunal were barbaric and false, and he parroted those beliefs. As he spoke to the Diviner about this, he realized that the Imperials had won a battle against him and his people, one that he didn't even realize he had been fighting. He'd let his very culture be stolen from him, his heritage, his possible identity. True Dunmer culture had been twisted and obscured, all in the name of being imperialized. The Dunmer in Cheydinhal had not lived as true Dunmer. The culture that they believed was their race's own was a foul imitation of imperial values, a homunculus that had life breathed into it by their very oppressors. They were told that that view of the Tribunal is how enlightened Dunmer see them, that they must agree if they were to be viewed as true imperial citizens. But the truth was that they would never be accepted as Imperials. Their dark skin and red eyes proved that. He returned to the temple that winter very often, and was told much about Morrowind and its faith. Whether these stories were true or not, Kinlaur allowed himself to believe in them. He grew a strange sense of pride for something that he had never allowed himself to indulge in. In these visits, he grew an idealized view of the proud Dunmer folk of Morrowind. One winter day, Kinlaur's shift guarding Opius began. He entered the head office and found that the Imperial was in a rage, and Benoit was trying desperately to calm him down. When he found he couldn't, Benoit and the others followed a red-faced Opius through the streets of the marketplace. They came to a simple-looking house, and Opius demanded they break down the door. Benoit insisted that they simply knock and announce themselves. When that didn't work, he sighed and instructed the others to break their way in. With a few spells and a swing of some maces, they rushed into the house, Opius behind them. Inside were a half-dozen men, with armor and weapons, led by a terrified Imperial merchant. Indecipherable yelling began, with only a few discernible words about payment and agreements. This was quickly ended, when the scared merchant drew his sword and everyone else followed suit. The ensuing battle was a blur, but Kinlaur recalled killing one of these armed men, with a sword slash and fire to the face. Following this series of motions, almost on instinct, Kinlaur stepped back to the door and slashed the merchant, who he saw in his periphery. Kinlaur only realized the moment after he had swung. The merchant was attempting to flee, and had dropped his blade. Kinlaur was frozen, staring at the man choking on his own blood. This was how the Imperial Guards had found Kinlaur and his companions. He didn't resist when they slapped irons on him. During the fighting, Slippery Benoit had somehow managed to get away. He later learned that the armored men were other mercenaries, like him. In fact, they were better than him. Simple, honest warriors protecting an innocent merchant who refused to give his tithe of coins to Opius, who ran his trading guild with an iron fist. A girl hidden in a closet told everything to the Imperial Guard. She pointed to Kinlaur as the chief murderer. He felt he was reprehensible, immoral, and could never be forgiven. Benoit had always assured Kinlaur he would never stain his honor, though always with a laughing caveat. Of course, unless there's enough coin thrown in, my boy. Opius was the head of a guild, but all across the city knew him as a brute. Benoit had to have known something like this was going to happen, and certainly he knew of Opius's reputation, since he had told the men to never mention their employer when they were off duty. Kinlaur later learned that all Opius had suffered was a brief house arrest and a large fine, one that he could easily pay. He claimed that his mercenaries had overreacted, and a simple business discussion turned to an argument, and that one of them, a dark elf, had swung needlessly at the merchant when he refused to pay, viciously murdering him. It was nonsense, of course, but Kinlaur still felt that he deserved to be within that prison. He had murdered. The excuses and specifics didn't matter. In prison, the diviner visited him occasionally, and spoke about their understanding of the situation. They also continued preaching to Kinlaur about Morrowind. They claimed they knew Kinlaur would have a chance at freedom again, someday. He wanted to believe them. He greatly wanted to. But to say he did not lose hope some days would be a lie. But beneath that despair, he still had dreams. And he did dream of that chance. What he dreamed of most was a land, clear and vivid in his mind. He dreamed of the fires of a red mountain whose ash covered the shores before a great city built upon the waters, a giant stone caught in the air above it. He dreamed of who he would be in that land, and found every time that he dreamed he was someone different. Would he be a mercenary as he was before? A vagrant on the streets? A simple priest devoted to the tribunal? Or perhaps something more, something greater? Every night, he dreamed of that land. He dreamed of Morrowind. This video is the prologue to a series I'm going to be making on Morrowind. This first video serves to establish who Kinlaur, my personal player character, is, and the reasons I made for him to be in the position that Morrowind puts you in at the beginning of the game. The only confines Morrowind gives your character is that they were born to uncertain parents and were imprisoned in the Imperial City before being shipped to Morrowind. The video series after this point will be 1 part retrospective, 1 part roleplayed storytelling, and a 1 part community and mod showcase. I'll be going through the entire game as Kinlaur and recounting his story while also touching on my opinions on things like gameplay, lore, and the world. My goal is to showcase Morrowind's excellent role-playing and immersion that causes everyone to form their own personal attachments to the world. My other main goal as well is to showcase Morrowind's excellent community, as it is not an exaggeration to say that Morrowind's continued lifespan is due to its fanbase. There are modders who continually produce game-quality fan-made expansions, intriguing lore-friendly quests, locations, armor, and weapons, each that push the bounds of what the game was capable of during its development. In addition to the modders are excellent artists who make some of the best fan art of any gaming community. Morrowind has a very unique aesthetic that carries over into most fan art, even if it has someone's own individual twist on it. There are also, of course, my fellow video creators who make their own retrospectives, challenges, mod reviews, and playthroughs. I've been asking around for about a year, gathering permission from many fan artists to use and showcase their art in these videos, and I'll continue gathering permissions as this series continues to show more and more people's art off. This series has been a long time coming, and it was arguably the goal of my channel. Every Morrowind retrospective I've seen reviews the base game with at most a few quality of life mods, and this is completely understandable if not expected, but I don't want to do that. Morrowind for me is tied inexorably to the community's contributions, and Morrowind as such means an infinite number of things to an infinite number of people. Something Michael Kirkbride coda.
Codified. I'm ashamed of you.
As such, I'm sure I will get many comments saying that this video series is not as valid as an actual unmodded opinion piece on Morrowind, but those already exist, and I will not be hiding the fact that this isn't a vanilla-based series. I will be playing with many mods, with a focus of mostly additions to the world, and when mods show up, I will have the mods be clearly identified. My mod list will also be made public with the first main video. I have them all in a Google Doc with descriptions and links to each mod I use, as well as some little tangents from me about them. Most people who play Morrowind now will mod it. Morrowind, like most Bethesda games, has become a customizable playground, and it is that nature that I also want to cover, while also going over why the unchanged bone structure beneath all of that contributions are still amazing in its tone, world building, and systems. Regardless, I think it's important to cover Morrowind's fan community. For full transparency, Kinlaur is a character I've played before. In fact, he was the first Morrowind character I played years ago. And though I was a fan of Oblivion, I knew next to nothing about Morrowind, aside from the most basic things. I went in with a planned idea of who Kinlaur would be, and it was subverted. Through immersing myself in the world, Kinlaur grew to be a living figure in my mind, who made decisions that I had not planned for him to make. I joined factions that were the exact opposite of what I decided hours before when creating him. All of these things were based on outsiders' idea of what Morrowind was, but playing it was something different entirely. In this series, I will be loosely recreating Kinlaur's journey that I took all those years ago. Of course, I can't remember the exact path of A to B to C, which dungeons and quests were taken in what order, but I do know where Kinlaur ends up, and rediscovering how he gets to where he will be going is going to be great fun for me too. And the backstory I've made for him here, I hope, will make his eventual evolution as a character satisfying to watch, as Kinlaur is not going to be a static character. So while this is somewhat scripted, with a planned character already made, the journey will still be written as I replay. It's authentic and real Morrowind gameplay. And the parts that are planned, which factions and main quest decisions, were authentically made choices I made years ago. It is still a true reflection of Morrowind's emergent stories that it makes the player form as the world unfolds in ways they did not know that it could. I hope that you all will enjoy this journey, and are excited as I am to have Kinlaur go to Morrowind. If you enjoyed this video and are excited for the next ones, consider supporting me on Patreon or Ko-Fi. It would be greatly appreciated. I have a couple of bonuses on Patreon, and as people begin to join, I'll start posting more extras on there. And if you do join, I'll be saying and showing your name in my videos as thanks. This has been your resident eccentric, and I will see you again. Farewell.
A little bird told me that you've been asking around town about the resident eccentric. I'd like to know why.